In the annals of criminal history, few names resonate with the terrifying power and unfathomable wealth of Pablo Escobar. For years, he sat atop a cash empire so vast, so relentless, that it defied conventional understanding. At its peak, the Medellin cartel, under Escobar's iron fist, was pulling in an estimated $420 million every single week. This wasn't merely rich, this was a financial scale that challenged the very definition of wealth, placing him squarely on Forbes' list of the world's billionaires. It was a fortune built on a mountain of white powder, flowing relentlessly into the veins of America, and returning as an uncontrollable river of greenbacks. How did one man, from a modest background, construct such a colossal financial apparatus? The answer lay in the insatiable demand for cocaine, particularly in the United States during the 1980s. Escobar wasn't just a drug trafficker, he was a master logistical architect, controlling every link of the supply chain from coca fields to international distribution. His cartel streamlined production, perfected smuggling routes, and eliminated competition with brutal efficiency. The product was pure, the distribution was unparalleled, and the profits, therefore, were astronomical, creating a feedback loop of demand and supply that generated unimaginable sums. The weekly cash influx wasn't merely an abstract number, it was a physical deluge. Cargo planes, typically used for legitimate goods, were repurposed to fly billions of dollars back from the United States to Colombia. This wasn't subtle, this was an industrial-scale reverse trade operation, bringing money back by the ton. Imagine private jets, their passenger seats ripped out, stacked floor to ceiling with bundled American $100 bills. This river of currency flowed endlessly, creating an immediate and overwhelming problem that no legitimate business, let alone an illegal one, had ever truly faced. What do you do with that much physical cash? The sheer volume of currency quickly became a logistical nightmare of epic proportions. Banks were out of the question, no financial institution could absorb or explain such illicit wealth. So, Escobar and his lieutenants resorted to increasingly desperate and primitive methods of storage. Entire warehouses were converted into giant cash vaults, hidden away in rural Colombia. Secret compartments were built into the walls of safe houses, floors, and even buried beneath farmland. The money was literally piled up, sometimes in stacks taller than a man, creating a continuous, tangible testament to their staggering, yet utterly unmanageable, success. The mundane realities of handling this unprecedented fortune were bizarre. Roberto Escobar, Pablo's brother and chief accountant, famously revealed that they spent an astonishing $2,500 a month just on rubber bands. Think about that, a fortune spent not on investments, not on lavish goods, but on simple elastic bands to bundle up stacks of hundreds. This absurd detail perfectly encapsulates the economic madness. And then came the natural enemies of physical cash: humidity, mold, and worst of all, rats. Billions of dollars were simply eaten away, nibbled into worthless shreds by rodents, a silent, relentless tax on illicit wealth. For any legitimate business, profit means reinvestment, expansion, and security in financial markets. But Escobar's profits were different. This was black money, untraceable and unbankable. Depositing even a fraction of it would immediately trigger alarms and investigations from financial authorities worldwide. This critical constraint meant the cartel operated in a perpetual state of financial paralysis, constantly generating massive wealth but unable to integrate it into the global economy. The very scale of their success became their greatest operational weakness, forcing them into increasingly inefficient and risky storage methods. When warehouses weren't enough, and banks were out of the question, Escobar turned to the most ancient and primitive form of safekeeping: burying his fortune. Vast sums were packed into barrels, plastic containers, and even garbage bags, then interred deep within the Colombian earth. Remote farms, jungle clearings, and even his own Hacienda Napoles became vast, unmarked burial grounds for untold billions. These were not sophisticated vaults, they were literal holes in the ground, dug by hand, filled with stacks of cash, and then covered over, left to the mercy of the elements and the creeping oblivion of memory. The earth offered no true sanctuary. Beyond the rubber bands and mundane costs, the most significant losses came from the elements and pests. Humidity turned crisp bills into moldy mush.
Water infiltration ruined entire stashes, turning millions into worthless pulp. But it was the rats, insatiably drawn to the paper and the isolated darkness, that truly plundered the empire. These tiny scavengers chewed through bundles, built nests in stacks, and effectively levied a rodent tax that, over time, accounted for billions in destroyed currency. It was a bizarre, slow, and uncontrollable hemorrhage of wealth. Despite the daily losses, the cartel had to find ways to legitimize some of its profits. This led to the intricate, often violent, world of money laundering. Initially, methods were crude: small businesses, casinos, and real estate purchases. The goal was to cycle the dirty cash through seemingly legitimate enterprises, emerging clean on the other side. This wasn't just about making the money usable, it was about building an economic facade, a veneer of respectability that could justify the lavish lifestyles and expand the cartel's influence. But even laundering at this scale was a Sisyphean task. Escobar poured money into a vast array of legitimate-looking businesses, not just for laundering, but to create a public image and expand his power base. He owned football clubs, taxi fleets, restaurants, and construction companies. His most infamous venture, Hacienda Napoles, was a sprawling luxury estate featuring a private zoo with hippos, giraffes, and elephants imported from around the world. These were not merely personal indulgences, they were monumental investments in a legitimate empire designed to obscure the true, illicit source of his wealth, creating a bewildering mix of brutal criminality and public spectacle.
The man tasked with managing this fiscal chaos was Roberto Escobar, Pablo's older brother.
He became the cartel's chief accountant, facing an impossible challenge.
His books were a nightmarish ledger of cash inflows, outflowing bribes, and unaccounted losses.
He estimated that a staggering 10% of their total wealth was simply lost or destroyed each year due to spoilage, rats, and other unforeseen circumstances. That's billions annually, vanishing into thin air, or rather, into damp earth and rodent stomachs.
It was a testament to the unmanageable nature of their success, a financial hole that even their immense profits couldn't completely fill. Even after Escobar's death, stories persisted of immense stashes still hidden, waiting to be discovered. Farmers occasionally stumbled upon barrels of cash buried beneath their fields, decaying, but still holding value. Construction workers unearthed forgotten caches during excavations.
These finds, though sporadic, fueled the legend of Escobar's lost billions, the untold sums that were simply too vast, too widely distributed, and too poorly recorded to ever be fully recovered or even accounted for. It was wealth without ownership, an economic phantom limb of the cartel's former glory.
Perhaps the most vivid illustration of Escobar's cash-rich, yet resource-poor dilemma came during his time on the run.
One cold night, while hiding in a mountain hideout with his family, his daughter Manuela fell ill with hypothermia. Faced with a freezing child and abundant, but useless, cash, Escobar made an astonishing decision. He pulled out bundles of US dollars, roughly $2 million in crisp $100 bills, and set them ablaze to provide warmth. It was a moment of profound desperation and surreal excess, literally burning through an amount of money that most people couldn't earn in a lifetime, all to stay warm. Despite the billions lost to decay, theft, and desperate acts like burning, the Medellin cartel's lavish spending continued unabated. Escobar's private zoo alone cost a fortune to maintain, requiring imported exotic animals, specialized care, and vast amounts of food. His network of luxury homes, private jets, and fleets of vehicles demanded constant upkeep. This wasn't just about personal enjoyment, it was a deliberate projection of power and an outward manifestation of his untouchable status. But beneath the veneer of opulence lay the core economic reality, a staggering inefficiency driven by the very nature of his illicit business. As the cartel's wealth grew, so did the international pressure to dismantle it. Governments, particularly the US and Colombian authorities, escalated their war on drug money. Asset forfeiture laws became more stringent, and efforts to trace and seize cartel assets intensified. This forced Escobar and his associates into an even more desperate cat-and-mouse game, constantly moving money, diversifying hiding places, and attempting more sophisticated, yet still imperfect, laundering schemes. The very existence of such vast, illicit cash became a glaring target, drawing relentless scrutiny and contributing to the empire's eventual downfall.
The Medellin cartel's cash empire was not merely inefficient, it was a massive economic drain on Colombia.
The billions generated were largely outside the legitimate economy, fueling corruption, violence, and instability rather than productive growth. While some money trickled into local businesses through laundering, the vast majority represented a national opportunity cost. It was wealth that couldn't be taxed, invested publicly, or used to build sustainable infrastructure. Instead, it funded a shadow economy, distorting markets and creating a dangerous cycle of dependency on illicit profits, leaving a toxic legacy for the nation. For all the talk of billions, much of Escobar's fortune was effectively illiquid and unusable. $1 billion buried in a damp jungle, half-eaten by rats, is not the same as $1 billion in a diversified investment portfolio or a bank account. It was a phantom wealth, immense in quantity but severely limited in utility. The legend of his riches often overshadowed the absurd reality. Much of his fortune was decaying, lost, or trapped in physical forms that made it more of a liability than a liquid asset.
His wealth was both legendary and largely mythological in its practical application. Ultimately, the very success of Escobar's cash-generating machine became its undoing.
The sheer volume of money was impossible to control, impossible to clean, and impossible to hide indefinitely. It was an Achilles heel, a tangible vulnerability that invited scrutiny and created insurmountable logistical challenges.
The constant need to move, store, and launder such vast sums consumed enormous resources and exposed the cartel to countless risks. It was a business model where the product, money, created more problems than it solved, proving that even criminal empires must contend with fundamental economic realities. Roberto Escobar, the man who knew the numbers better than anyone, reflected on the futility of it all. He often spoke of the unimaginable stress and the constant fear of discovery that came with handling such vast sums. It was madness, he once stated, recounting the daily struggle to manage money that was literally rotting away. His insights painted a picture not of glorious wealth, but of a never-ending battle against decay, theft, and the relentless pressure of an empire drowning in its own success. The financial reality was far grimmer than the public perception of an endlessly rich kingpin. The popular image of Pablo Escobar conjures notions of untouchable riches, boundless power, and absolute control. Yet, the story of his cash empire reveals a starkly different truth. His wealth was fragile, constantly under threat, and incredibly difficult to leverage. It wasn't the kind of wealth that afforded true security or enduring power. Instead, it was a colossal burden, forcing him into a clandestine existence, driving him to desperate measures, and ultimately contributing to his violent demise. The billions were never truly untouchable, they were merely inaccessible, rotting silently, or being hunted relentlessly. When Pablo Escobar was finally hunted down and killed in December 1993, his cash empire didn't simply dissipate, it imploded. The vast sums he had amassed were largely lost, seized, or destroyed. What remained was a scattered, decaying legacy of economic waste. There was no clean handover of assets, no legitimate inheritance. The colossal wealth, intended to secure his family's future and fund his power, instead became a monument to its own self-defeating nature. It was an empire built on the most liquid of assets, yet ultimately characterized by its profound economic illiquidity and its corrosive impact. The story of Pablo Escobar's cash empire offers a chilling, yet fascinating, lesson in economics. Even with boundless revenue, an enterprise built on illegality and physical currency faces insurmountable challenges. The inability to bank, invest, or legitimately integrate wealth into the global financial system creates bizarre inefficiencies, leading to immense losses from the most mundane of sources: rubber bands, rats, and humidity. It's a testament to the fundamental principles of finance. True wealth lies not just in accumulation, but in liquidity, security, and the ability to leverage and grow assets within a stable, legal framework.